talking about a book by the science fiction writer Stanley Robinson called Aurora. There is a certain plot in the science fiction genre that goes back pretty far, called the colony ship, or the ark in space. The idea is, once it became apparent that the speed of light was a more or less permanent barrier to interstellar travel in one person's lifetime, science fiction adopted the idea that perhaps travel to other stars would still be possible if people built ships that were designed to be lived on for very long periods of time, like centuries potentially. This idea showed up and there's an early Robert Heinlein story. I think it's called "The Ship Will Be Steered." There's a Brian Aldiss story. There's a couple episodes of Doctor Who. This idea shows up a lot, and the attractions are obvious because the implication is people would be born on the ship and that would be their whole world, with no direct knowledge of life back on Earth or of life to come on the planet, the star system that they're trying to reach, and you get really cool possibilities from that. Stanley Robinson's Aurora is the best version of this plot I've been exposed to. It is really compelling, and it's built out of his hard science fiction is great. It's set far, the events of the book are set a few hundred years in the future, when some of the technologies that right now are only beginning to emerge are fully developed, which might make such a venture possible. So they have much better AI, there is much better 3D printing, the maintenance of the ship, which would require a really intimate knowledge of like everything on the ship, like every molecule, in order to find out where it's going, so that you can maintain the ship systems over a very long period. Like those technologies become possible. So he gives the idea a fair shot, and builds it up as sort of a very elaborate problem to be solved. We join the vessel when it's already well advanced, getting moderately close to its goal in Tau Ceti, one of the nearest star systems. They think they've spotted a habitable moon in that system. It's been there long enough that it's like 100 years into its voyage or more, and there are the adults on the vessel they do not remember Earth, and the youth of the vessel have developed new sort of this is their world. It's a large vessel. It's large enough that you can at least imagine a large population of people going, large for both genetic diversity and for psychological reasons. This ship is divided into different sections so that people get some of sort of the tribal loyalties that seem to be important to people for their health in the long run, and yet also working together. And the whole thing is managed by a really good AI service who tracks everything. There's living life is there. Like the sections of the ship are not cold, sterile 2001 environments. That's considered impossible in the long run. They are like actual living biospheres with animals and plants and fungi and soil. All beneath it all, of course, is the technology, but at least on the surface, with like artificial lighting representing the sun and the moon. So Robinson spends a good chunk of the book establishing that he is really giving the idea a fair chance. He is really trying to solve the problems that would be involved. And then as the book goes on and they make it to Tau Ceti, he works out the potential for the actual interstellar travel part pretty well, for like the propulsion and the stopping and everything, to the degree that I think it's technically possible. And and things do not go well. And then the book sort of takes a right turn, and they decide to go back. The group split. Half decide to go on and continue with the colonization project, and some decide to return. That right there is a pretty big twist. I have noticed a fair amount of science fiction and film involving a sort of successful return to Earth these days, rather than like finding a new home out there. It's all about like sort of healing Earth and coming back to it, or saving Earth. So Gravity, for example, which is all about a safe return to Earth, or Interstellar, which is all about finding a new place that Earth can return to. It seems to be an important theme, and then it becomes a major ethical question, which Robinson suggests is really the heart of such projects, which is, what do you owe the future? What do you owe your children? Does anyone have the right, even if they themselves would wish to travel to another star, to Tau Ceti, do they have the right to commit their offspring to such a venture when they could stay home? in this world, Earth it's not great, but it's the healthy, the healthy biosphere that we are familiar with, and although recovering from the environmental challenges of the next few centuries, but do you have the right to commit your future inheritance to such a limited prospect, to such a risky venture? It's compelling. I don't think there's an answer. He's in the book, he leans, of course, towards no, you don't, not to such a risky one, although all of our we do have to make decisions for our future generations by nature, but this one is beyond the pale. When you compare the life that the generations who only knew life aboard the ship with the life they could have had, or some version of them could have had back on Earth, it seems that the life on Earth has to win out against such a strange and quixotic gesture as trying to establish an interstellar colony. He compares the effort to essentially a large sculpture, or like a gigantic art project, like the effort at Interstellar, because there's no sense that these colonies provide any economic or political advantage. So it's more sort of like a gesture of built out of a sort of ethic of going because it's there, a sort of gesture of just human expansionism as a baseline reason to be. He critiques the quote, I think it's by the Russian space theorist Tsiolkovsky, about how Earth is the cradle of humanity, and so space is when we step out of the cradle and grow into our adult selves and stop being such planet-bound babies. And Robinson's pretty hard on this, pretty hard on this idea. He has a character smack somebody who says it like right in the jaw, and the idea being that our future is intimately bound to the future of Earth, whether we like it or not. That we just aren't really going anywhere in any significant sense anytime soon. He gives it a fair shot. He assumes a great deal of technological progress at a rate that I think a lot of people would find reasonable. But unless we make some surpassing discovery about the laws of physics, there's just no reason to go anywhere, and there's probably nowhere to go close enough to make it feasible. This is kind of the we're not going anywhere thesis, which I think it was the science fiction writer Charles Stross wrote about in an essay about 15 years ago, where he said this changes everything for science fiction. Certainly, if interstellar travel is not going to be a real thing, then it forever becomes an element of just kind of space fantasy like Star Wars, and it sort of brings science fiction down to different levels for those who care about such things as, you know, moderately realistic science fiction. And it also, you know, maybe even changes things for humanity, because if we're not going anywhere, if we really aren't going anywhere, if we maybe will be able to, you know, set up shop in a small way on within the solar system for various things, and even there, you know, it's kind of questionable, then we really have a limit to the human horizon. And then it becomes, what do you do within those limits? What other horizons might we pursue? What other projects should we advance instead of this one? So it's a very good book. It's structured really well. It passes the storytelling baton back and forth between one of the characters born on the ship and the AI itself in a way that's really pleasing. The hard sci-fi for anyone who's like into like engineering and you know, a whole range of different kinds of problems, from like, you know, metabolic gaps to chemistry to sociology to conflict resolution. There's a lot going on here to enjoy, and it just has a lot of really cool storytelling beats. Stanley Robinson is up there with his range as a writer. He really is a kind of one of those put everything into the book because I can't bear to leave anything out kind of writers. So give it a read. A lot of fun. Fairly recent. I tend to talk about older stuff, but this one came out just a few years ago, and I enjoyed it deeply. So yeah. Till next time.